You're listening to Simply the Best Sports Take, the best podcast breaking down the best stuff in sports with host Sean Bingham. His takes are so good, he dropped the mic, but then you wouldn't be able to hear him, and that would suck.
Get your sights up, aim high, let him see your fire. Pray for
Welcome into Simply the Best Sports Podcast. I am your host, Sean Bingham, and today, believe it or not, I'm going to get a little political. This will be a first. We'll keep a sports theme around it, but I got some stuff on my mind I got to get out there. But before I dive into that, before I get into some politics stuff and some things that are topics in the country right now, we got to stay on track with the NBA playoffs. So let's do this first. Let's talk about the playoffs. Let's talk about Steph Curry and the Warriors and how they dominated the Thunder last night. And then we'll get into some of that more, interesting stuff when it comes to politics anyway. So last night I'm watching the game. First of all, I went boating yesterday, late, went and did some wake surfing. It was a ton of fun. And me and a buddy, we agreed that we would record the game and not look at our phones or check the score or anything like that until we got home from boating and we could watch the game. For us anyway, it would be like as if it was live. So we go up there, go boating, have a great time, come back, we go to grab a bite, and at this point it's like, it's 10:30 or something. And there's, TVs on in the restaurant, and we asked them to change the channel because we don't want to see, the post-game interviews and stuff. So they changed the channel for us. We managed to escape, and we truly did not know the outcome of the game. I knew in advance, and, I can't really prove this because I didn't podcast yesterday, but I knew the Warriors were going to win Game 2 going away. There was no way they were going to lose 2 at home. I knew it wouldn't even be close. They had just lost the home opener. There was just no way they were going to let that repeat. There was no way it was going to even be close. They had to make a statement. And make a statement they did. They came out and just absolutely destroyed the Thunder. It was actually close through the first half, and even at the end of the first half, the Thunder had a lead. And then just like that, it was gone within a matter of like a minute. And I think they were down by 6 at halftime. And then the third quarter, it was the Steph Curry show. I mean, the dude went on a 15-2 run by himself in a minute 58. In a minute 58, Steph Curry scored 15 points. I mean, that's crazy. He is so good. His shot is so pure, and his release is so quick. And his ball handling skills, oh my gosh, his ball handling skills. He dribbles the ball in ways we've never seen. He maneuvers and, through traffic and gets into the lane and finishes at the hoop better than anything we've ever seen. And the guy shoots like 50% from the field, right? He shoots like 40% from 3, but more than half of his shots are threes, which means all the 2-point field goals he's taking, he's got to be making like 65% of those or something. I don't know what the stat is, but it's crazy the way he's able to finish at the hoop. I mean, he's weaving through 3 and 4 guys and doing these crazy circus shots with some English and his fakes and all these things. It's crazy, and he's doing it against guys that are far taller than him, bigger, stronger, etc. He is incredible. I've gone on the record saying that I don't think he's going to be like a relevant superstar within, I said it last year, I said within 5 years. So that would mean 4 years from now pretty much, or 4 years from, 4 more seasons after this one's over. And I'm actually going to stand by that. He's incredible right now. I don't think we'll see Steph Curry on the first, second, or even third team All-NBA 4 or 5 seasons from now. I don't think we will. I think his game is too reliant on athleticism, and his size won't allow him to transition the way other players have. When Michael Jordan was losing some of his greatness athletically, he turned to the post-up game, and he became a master at the post-up. And I don't know what that next step would be for Steph Curry. You look at a guy like Steve Nash, who had a similar game. Obviously, Steph's prime is far better than Nash's prime, but Nash was a 2-time MVP as well, and he had very similar ball handling skills that were just kind of like different, than we've seen before. And Nash was a really good shooter as well, obviously not to the level of Steph, but a really good shooter. So their games are kind of similar. The second that Nash's athleticism started to fail him, his career ended. I mean, there was just nothing he could really turn to. He was very similar, just a amazing free throw shooter, amazing jump shooter, amazing 3-point shooter. Could wheel and deal, get into the lane, find the open man, finish at the rack, with some kind of fancy unorthodox moves. Very, very similar game to Steph Curry. Not as good as Steph Curry, but very similar. And when that athleticism goes and you're like 6'2", 6'3", there's not much else you can do in the league. It's not a big man's league in the sense that it's not a center's league, but it's a big man's league in the sense that if you're not big, you're not going to last very long. I mean, look, Kevin Durant is like 6'11". He plays small forward, but he's 6'11". It's a big man's league in that sense. So I think Steph Curry is amazing. It's super fun to watch him right now. We're getting to witness greatness. We're getting to witness some of the, I don't want to say the best seasons ever, but it really is, among the best seasons ever, especially if the Warriors go on to win it all. Then this is right up there with that 72-10 Bulls team. I'm still going to say the 72-10 Bulls team in 1996 would beat this team in 4 or 5 games. I'd say 5. But what we're witnessing is incredible, and it's really fun to watch. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens, as they go back to OKC now. Game 3 is going to be a really important game for both teams because now it's up to OKC to keep the home court advantage that they stole in Game 1. And it's up to Golden State to steal it back. I think Golden State will steal it back in Game 3 or 4. I don't know which one, but I'm guessing it'll be Game 3. I think they'll win again. And I wouldn't be surprised to see this one closed out in 5. But my prediction is Golden State in 6. That's what I've thought from the beginning. And even with OKC stealing Game 1, I'm going to stick with Golden State in 6. I think they go in and they steal one of Game 3 or 4. Then they lose the other one, of course. And then they win Game 5 at home. And then they close it out in 6 on the road. So that's my prediction for the Western Conference Finals. And this is not the NBA Finals. A lot of people are trying to say that. The Cleveland Cavaliers are probably going to be 12-0 entering the NBA Finals. They've got Game 2 tonight. There's a good chance that Toronto can win Game 3 or 4 at home. And then Cleveland closes it out in Game 5, back at their place. But there's no way this series goes beyond 5 games. So the Cavaliers are going to be the most rested and healthy team that there ever was entering an NBA Finals, which is what everybody wants. LeBron wants it. The Warriors want it. We all want it. The general public, we all want it, right? Media wants it. We want to see Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, and Steve Kerr go up against a healthy LeBron, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Love. We didn't get it last year. We felt like we got robbed. We saw a 6-game series where it was essentially LeBron and Matthew Dellavedova against the Warriors. And, to go 6 games, that was impressive by LeBron and co. But now they've got Kyrie. They've got K-Love. They're clicking on all cylinders. Things are looking good. Tyronn Lue actually seems to be a pretty darn good coach, in my opinion. And they're just like running through the Eastern Conference. That conference is literally a joke. It's too bad that Chris Bosh and Hassan Whiteside got hurt because I do think a healthy Heat team in the Eastern Conference Finals could have made it at least interesting. Maybe it could have stretched it to 6 games, But regardless, we're going to see the Cavaliers in the finals, most likely, of course, against the Warriors. I'm not going to count OKC out. They're a good team. Game 1 was impressive. But, they're now 1-4 against the Warriors this year. So they've played them 5 times, twice, of course, in the postseason, 3 times in the regular season. 0-3 in the regular season, 1-1 in the postseason. So I don't really see it happening for OKC. They are a team that seems like they're on the verge of just breaking through, They've been good for a while. They're veterans now. Even though they're young, Durant's been in the league for like 7 years or something, 8 years. Same with Russell Westbrook. So they've got to be, they're on the verge of breaking through. But unfortunately, they're up against a team that is also young and athletic, but also veterans in a very similar boat, been in the league long enough that they know what's going on, but they're young enough that they're still really athletic and talented, and they're just better. So the Warriors are going to win that series, most likely in 6, and then I'm thinking they're going to play the Cavs. Well, I'm not thinking. I'd bet any amount of money that they'll play the Cavs. And then the NBA Finals, I guess we'll just see what happens. I'm going to take the Warriors, but, we'll talk about that as the time comes. But Game 2 tonight in Cleveland should be another just, yawner, snoozer. I don't really think it'll be anything worth watching. I'll watch it just because it's NBA basketball and I like it, but I'm guessing it's another, Cavaliers win going away. So that's that. That's it for the NBA playoffs for now. We'll talk more, in a few days, but I'm a huge Washington Redskins fan. Okay, so we're going to get into some of this political stuff. The reason I'm a Redskins fan is I grew up in D.C. I was born in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., and so I'm a huge D.C. sports guy. I'm a huge Redskins fan. I'm a huge Washington Nationals fan. I was a Baltimore Orioles fan growing up because that was the team that was there. The Nationals were at the time the Montreal Expos. But the second the Nationals, came to D.C., I became a huge fan. I've lived in Utah, since I was 9, so I was just a kid when we moved away from Virginia. But the Redskins won their 3 Super Bowls in the time that I was there. So Redskins is like in my blood, I grew up in the 80s as a kid, and the Redskins dominated the 80s. They won their last Super Bowl in the 91 season. And so I'm a huge Redskins fan, for all the right reasons. No matter how bad they have been, in past years, they're my favorite team. I really don't care about other teams. I love the NFL, and I watch it because I love the sport. But here's how I work. I'm a fan of sports first, and teams come after that. And so, I'm a huge fan of the NFL. But when it comes to my team, the team that I really care if they win or lose, the Redskins is it. Every other game I watch, I'm a fan of the sport, and therefore I just want to see a good game. When it's the Redskins, they can't win by enough. Win by 100 if you can, Let's just not make it. Let's not have any scares, So that's how I am with the Redskins. So now, today, the Washington Post, which, by the way, is widely known as like the second most respected newspaper in America behind the New York Times and ahead of USA Today. Okay, the Washington Post. So before you think, oh, that's the Washington Post, it's biased. No, this is a newspaper that very much relies on being respected, being diplomatic about things, I guess you could say. And they're in the nation's capital, so if there's ever been, PC, it's our nation's capital, politically correct, crap that I'm going to get into. But anyway, so the Washington Post released today that they did a poll, and that 90% of Native Americans throughout the entire country, 90% said that they do not care at all that the Redskins have the name of the Redskins. 90%. So this is a message to all the white people out there, and I'm white, by the way, so I'm allowed to say this. All you people that are pretending to care, that are trying to be politically correct, stop telling minorities what they think and how they should feel. They can tell us themselves. And they did today. 90% do not care that the Redskins have the name of the Redskins. 90%. That was out of 504 people around the country that identified primarily as Native Americans. Not just like, I'm kind of, like I got like 1/16th. Primarily identified as Native Americans. They don't care. They like the name. They think it's great. So stop telling them what they should think or how they should feel, okay? So, and this isn't even news. Like, this isn't news. They did a poll, and the Annenberg Center did a poll in 2004 that said the same thing. And here we are doing it again in 2016, And what's interesting is that 78% in this same poll said that they just don't even think it's an issue. Not only does the name not bother them at all, 90% said that it doesn't bother them. Like, no, I'm not bothered by it. Like, I'm a Native American, and the name doesn't bother me, okay? But on top of that, they said it's just not even important. It's just not an issue. Like, let it go. Like, who cares, Anyway, and so Susan Harjo, and I hope I'm pronouncing that last name right, she is Native American, and so, she's very entitled to her opinion. So she's Native American saying how she feels about it, and she's obviously very much against it, which is her prerogative. And she's like the lead plaintiff challenging the team's trademarks and all that stuff like that. And, what's interesting, and this is where I just think that, our PC country is becoming so funny. She says, I don't accept self-identification. That's what she says, okay? So in other words, she's saying like these people apparently like, aren't allowed to say if they're Native American or not Native American. So I'd be interested to know what which in my opinion, you're either Native American or you're not. Okay. And this is what I'm about to get into because, I can agree with her in some aspects of like, you don't just get to say if you are or aren't. And I'm going to dive into even gender identification here. Okay. Because if she were to say that about gender identification, I mean, who knows? All hell would break loose, right? Because, you get to decide if you're a man or a woman, whatever you identify with. I mean, give me a break on that stuff. That's the most ridiculous statement I've ever heard. And it's sad how many people are like buying into it right now. So I do agree with her on that. But these are people who lived on like Indian reservations. Okay. These are people that are primarily Native Americans. So they definitely like are allowed to speak their mind along with you, Miss Susan Harjo. So congratulations, Susan Harjo. You are among the 10% that apparently care, and 90% of Native Americans are not bothered by the Redskins name. So it's staying, okay? So let's dive in now and this is what kind of got me going on all this stuff, right? And you can tell that I feel a little bit passionately about it. But this gender identification thing, which has nothing to do with sports, but it's a huge issue in the country right now. First of all, I think it actually like applies to like 0.03% of the population in the country is like, transgender. And so it's such a small portion of the country that this actually applies to, like the transgender bathrooms and things like that, right? Or being able to identify with what you want to identify and choosing the bathroom of your choice and blah, blah, blah. So, there was a group, I'm going to pull it up here and make sure I don't botch any of the stats. Or information, I should say. So there's a group and they're called what's the name of this group? The Family Policy Institute of Washington. Okay. The Family Policy Institute of Washington. That's this group that went and did this experiment on the University of Washington campus. And you got to watch the video on YouTube. It's absolutely hilarious. Like how ridiculous, people sound with their attempts at being PC, right? So they go on to Joseph Blackholm's the guy's name. He's the executive director for this organization, the FPIW, Family Policy Institute of Washington. So he goes on to the University of campus and he's obviously asking people about gender identification and if they should get to use, whatever restroom they want, or basically if they can just identify however they want, right? And of course, everybody's super careful to be super PC and, oh yeah, you get to identify with, if you think you're a woman, then you're a woman. If you think you're a man, then you're a man. And he's like, well, what if I told you I was Chinese? And he's very much a white guy. And they're like, well, but you're not. And he's like, well, what do you mean I'm not? And of course they immediately retract their statements. Well, yeah, if you identify as a Chinese person, I think that's great. Good for you. And the guy's 5'9", and he's like, what if I said I was 6'5"? And the answers are like, well, I mean, I'd have a hard time believing you, but if you identify as that, that's fine. Okay, what if I told you I was a 6'5" Chinese woman? And he's a 5'9" white guy. And they're just like, whoa, if that's how you identify, I think that's great. And it's like, oh my gosh, like, is this really what we've come to in our country? Is this really what we've come to? So then he goes further and he says, what if I identify as a 7-year-old? What if I told you I was 7 years old? And I don't know how old he is. He looks like he's in his late 20s kind of thing, early 30s maybe. And heaven forbid I should say how old I think he looks, right? Anyway, so they say, he says, what if I told you I was 7? And they're like, well, if you identify as that, that's great. And he's like, well, so what if I wanted to enroll in a first grade class because I identify as a 7-year-old, so I want to enroll in a first grade class as a 7-year-old? And just stop for a minute and think how ridiculous that is, okay? To go and enroll in a first grade class as a guy in your 30s because you identify as a 7-year-old, okay? And these students on the University of Washington campus just thought it would be fine. Yeah. If if you think that's what you need, then that's how you identify. Then that's what you should do. You have got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. That's where we're going. That mentality is the future of America. Heaven help us all. That is so dumb. I'm sorry. That is so dumb to say that somebody should be able to go and enroll in a first grade class as a 30-year-old because they identify as a 7-year-old. And I love the interview. You got to watch the video on YouTube. Just search on Google, I guess you could search this Family Policy Institute of Washington, or, Joseph Blackholm interviews University of Washington students about, gender identification, something like that. You'll find it. Watch the video because he just puts so beautifully into perspective how ridiculous it is that we're trying to pretend like we can choose our gender. If you want to get a sex change, go for it. Go for it. I love our country. I love the freedoms we have. I'm all for that. I believe that all men are created equal. I'm a very religious guy, and the church I'm a member of and believe in preaches equality. The country I live in and love preaches equality. I mean, it's in our Declaration of Independence, for crying out loud. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I don't have the whole thing memorized, but I got that much memorized. And I'm a firm believer in that. Male, female, transgender, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, any combination of any of those or anything in between or anything that I missed, we're all equal. I am 100% on board with that, firm believer in that. So I'm all for accepting everybody and loving everybody. 100%, okay? But you gotta think clearly about some of these things that we're doing. I mean, let's use an example that would maybe be a little bit easier for people to understand. Like, what if I'm a white guy, okay? I'm 34 years old and I'm a white guy. Now we just went through the example of this other guy saying, what if I said I was Chinese, and what if I wanted to enroll in a first grade class? It's like, it's ridiculous stuff, right? Like, that's not who he is. And like, we should love him for who he is. He should love himself for who he is, And if he wanted to go do some sort of like crazy surgeries and whatever they could do to make him a Chinese woman or to make him a 7-year-old or something like that, if that was possible, then I guess that's his prerogative to do it. I think it would be a horrible decision, but that's his prerogative. So we can't do that. Like, why are we trying to do that? Why is it an issue? Like, why are we talking about it? It's crazy to me. And everyone's hopping on board with this like PC crap. Like, be who you are. Stand up for what you believe in. Like, don't just, be a little minion following like whatever you think is PC and like what's going to win you cool points. Like, be who you are. Like, it just bothers me so much. And so that's what I'm doing right now. This is who I am. And, it's just such a big issue in the country. And I just think of the outrage, the absolute outrage that would come if me, being a white guy, said that I identified as a black person. And I said, I identify as an African American. Think how offensive that would be. I would never do that because that's not me. I don't want to offend somebody that is that, but that's what's happening. Like, there are some people that are born, that way. They're hermaphrodites and things like that, and they should be accepted and loved and treated equally. And, maybe those people, there should be a choice which bathroom they go to, right? But if you've been a man with man parts your whole life, just be a man, that's who you are, Think how offensive it would be if we went into the racial issue of that, right? If we said, well, I'm gonna be a Chinese woman now. I'm gonna be a black guy now. I'm gonna be a Asian now. I'm gonna be a Mexican now. It's like, that's offensive, and especially in our country, I think the black thing would hit home more. Just given the history of our country, that would be extremely offensive if I, as a white guy, said that I identify as a black man. And there are certain very highly offensive words that I've heard African Americans use amongst themselves and in many, songs that they sing. Can you imagine a white guy using that word and just saying like, "Oh, this is how I identify. I identify as a black musician that uses this word. They're out there. I identify with them, so I'm going to use it." Can you imagine how offensive that would be? Can you imagine how awful that would be? How wrong that would be? Let's just keep that kind of thing in perspective, So this all came about because, the Redskins finally get a little bit more support publicly. And it's nothing new. It's like, it's hilarious. Like, you look through all the polls that have been taken about the Redskins name. Literally not one of them does the majority say that they should change the name. There's been like probably a dozen polls. None of them say that the Redskins should change the name. Yet their patent and their trademark was removed. And there's all this uproar about like, "Oh, you can't use that name." Why don't we ask the Native Americans what they think? Well, guess what? They did ask them and they're fine with it. So just shut up. If you're trying to be PC cool, just shut up. Man, it's like everyone gets offended at everything. And I'm a huge fan of Seinfeld. Seinfeld was a show I grew up on. I love that show. It's hilarious. And Jerry Seinfeld, recently, or, within the last couple years anyway, said that it's just so hard to be a comedian now because everyone's offended at something. Everything's offensive to someone. Like, you can't say anything without, offending people. And I get that there are some things that are offensive. There's definitely things that cross a line. There's definitely things that are wrong. And those should be, we know what those are, right? We know what those are. And so just don't cross those lines. But I think we all could do ourselves a favor by just like relaxing a little bit, just relax, We've all got our little quirks or, nuances or little personality traits or physical traits or little things that, people could make fun of or whatever. And it is, making fun of somebody is hurtful, that can be hurtful. But it's how you respond to things. Like, when something's done truly like out of just humor, it's very, very different, and that would never apply to things, like certain vulgar words and things like that. But I think we could all just do ourselves a favor to just relax, just choose to not let things get to you, not get under your skin. But more importantly, like, just be who you are and respect everybody else. Mutual respect, mutual love. That's what I want to preach here. But with that means just that, like, respect them for them. So if you're a white guy, don't tell the Native Americans how they should feel about the name Redskins. Ask them. If you want to know how they feel, ask them. Don't tell them how they should feel. Ask them how they feel. The Washington Post did, and they don't care. So that's that. It's over. Give the Redskins back their trademark and pay them a lot of money for taking it away from them for a couple years wrongfully. It's just, it's ridiculous. So anyway, that's my rant. We got into a couple of different things there. We got into gender identification. We got into the, name of the Redskins and things like that. But that's my rant for now. I'll leave it at that. I could go deeper, but this is a sports podcast, and since it related to the Redskins, I liked it. So a lot of this PC stuff, all it does is point out differences. All it does is actually further perpetuate a problem that could be going away if we would just not worry about the color of somebody's skin, whether they're male or female, whether they're rich or poor. Let's stop pointing out the differences. To me, that's the real problem here. I'm a firm believer in God and that we are all children of God. We are brothers and sisters here, and it doesn't matter gender or race or, income level or education level or hobbies or talents or whatever. We're all equal. So let's stop pointing out the differences. Let's focus on the good. And speaking of things that are offensive, I'm offended that somehow the Cowboys are predicted to win the NFC East. That is offensive. Okay, the Redskins just won the division, and they only got better. So the Redskins are going to win the East. I'm out. Peace.
Thanks for hanging with Simply the Best Sports Take. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check out stbsportstake.com. Simply the best in sports.
'Cause we are